friends, welcome back to my channel. I decided to make another video, and today's video is another installment in What the Subgenre, a series where I tell you guys about some of my favorite subgenres, do a little deep dive, and I'm gonna keep making these even though you don't really like them. I like them! Watch my videos, damn it! You guys, the earth is dying. Today's theme is climate fiction. I've decided to do this theme today because tomorrow, the day after this is uploaded, is Earth Day. Earth Day is a day where we celebrate our home planet and how important it is to us as humans and our survival. And I feel like climate fiction is a subgenre that not a lot of people know about. Like you definitely have read it, but you don't know the term. And I think it's an important one to talk about. So this video is going to be heavily focused on science fiction because climate fiction does tend to fall into sci-fi and speculative fiction more than anything fantasy related. I do kind of have some fantasy ones in my stack here, so stick around even if you hate science fiction, because hey, you might learn something. So when I started doing my research into climate fiction for this video, it's something I've already known about, but obviously I like to learn a little bit before I start the video so that I can give you guys some proper information. When I was doing the research, I came across a list, climate fiction books to read before they become nonfiction, and that was spooky. And I kind of think that gives a good starting idea of what climate fiction is. As I already said, it is generally science-based speculative fiction where the main storyline hinges on climate change. The type of climate change doesn't really matter, it just has to be the climate is changing and it's impacting the storyline. And the setting doesn't really matter either, but usually it's either set in the real world right now, set in the real world in a near future, or set in an alternate universe that almost one-to-one resembles ours but is not technically Earth. Does that make sense? There are definitely fantasy books I've read that are completely that are completely high fantasy worlds that have a climate aspect to the storyline, but it's not really the climate fiction that we're talking about today, because climate fiction as a defined genre refers to sort of real world climate change. I'm sweating in here. It's April and it's hot because of climate change. And because I've got lights on me and I'm wearing a sweater. That's actually why it's hot in here. The term sci-fi, which is the shortening of climate fiction, was coined around 2008 by Dan Bloom. And notable authors in the genre are definitely Octavia E. Butler, Kim Stanley Robinson, Margaret Atwood. And if you know their works, you'll know they are quite dystopian in nature, but do have aspects of real science to them. To me, and to a lot of readers of sci-fi, there's like a range, definitely a spectrum of very depressing to quite hopeful, actually. I do feel that towards the 2007 end of this spectrum, the books were a lot more depressing and dystopian and imagining a future where things are awful, because we weren't quite in that reality or like a recognized reality of that yet. So it was more imaginative. And now, more recent releases, I have one in my stack in particular of an example. Now that we're kind of like living a very, very real possible threat to our planet, the sci-fi actually is becoming more hopeful, more cases of the characters solving issues and restoring hope to the planet, in a sense, in a way. Not completely, because it is still a book and it has to be interesting. And honestly, even though the term was coined so long ago in 2007 or 2008, it's not really become a recognized genre until the pandemic, essentially 2020. People really started to actually discuss climate fiction as its own subgenre. Kim Stanley Robinson's book, The Ministry of the Future, was sort of the one that brought this subgenre into the forefront, into the light of the dying sun. And because of this book, this is insane, but he was actually invited to the Pentagon to meet with planners in the US government, which is a little scary, not gonna lie. But honestly, climate fiction as a genre has been around for so long, even if it was not coined a specific subgenre. Your favorite, Dune, is technically climate fiction. It's not set in our world or even anything closely resembling our world, but the idea of a desert planet lacking water that's being ravaged by corporations is kind of a staple now of climate fiction. Usually in these videos, I will talk a lot more about the genre and then show books at the end, but I have quite a substantial stack of books, so I just want to jump into that pretty much. Hold on. So I already mentioned her, but one of the most prominent writers in the sci-fi genre is Octavia E. Butler, and the book that really stands out is Parable of the Sower. Her work not only focuses on themes of climate change, but also of class and race, and it really does a good job of weaving these things together into a story that sheds light on some real world problems involving how certain demographics of people are particularly affected by climate change or not being protected from climate change. I was gonna go through, when I show you all these books, I was gonna give you like a scale of depressing to hopeful, but I honestly, for most of these, I don't really know where to rank most of them because they're all both. It's a scary genre. It's not horror, but it's real. But I think a key aspect to these is that they do contain some grains of hope, no matter how frightening and in your face and existentially spooky they are, you know? The next one on here is a book that I think was the first climate fiction book I read, and I didn't know about the genre yet at the time. It's The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi. I don't know how to pronounce the name. I'm sorry if that's wrong. This is definitely more on the hard sci-fi speculative end. Like it's in space, alternate universe. It's not our real world like Parable of the Sowers, which is 2020's California. This is set in a future where calories are used as currencies and corporations run the world. Oil and gas is done for, but there's still big energy companies that are dictating politics and whatnot. There's bioengineering warfare, like plagues and stuff, and this book is not the most hopeful one, but it's also not set in our world. Very, very good though. This one, A Hue and a Nebula. I definitely recommend it for fans of true sci-fi. I need to rewind a bit because I think I said it's not set in our world. It is. It's set in Thailand, but it's like a very distant future version of Earth, so it feels like an alternate universe. Hummingbird Salamander by Jeff Vandermeer is one that actually made it into my weird fiction video because Jeff Vandermeer is a staple of weird fiction. But this one in particular is also climate fiction because it again has those staples of big companies, corporations, consumerism, capitalism, all the C words. And I think this is the first example I'm using that really has a focus on eco-terrorism. A lot of books in the climate fiction genre also have elements of eco-terrorism, bioterrorism, and really extremist views that are kind of possible in our real world. Earthflown by Frances Wren just came out. This is a self-published book with illustrations throughout it. I love that. The tagline of this is, where there's desperation, there's profit. And I think that is such a key mindset for so much cli-fi. Like if you were gonna sum up a big major theme in climate fiction, it is how corporations use the desperation of the populace to manipulate events throughout the books. And that kind of reflects our real world a little bit. A lot. Not a little, a lot. This book focuses on the control of water in this world, and it is also a queer romance. So if you're looking for one that's a little bit on the lighter side, like it's not a happy, light, fluffy story, but if you're looking for one that's less intense and has threads of familiar storylines like a romance, you might want to check this one out. And also, the illustrations are to die for. Buy it just for that, okay? Emily St. John Mandel is another big name in the genre. I specifically have here Sea of Tranquility, but her other novel, Station 11, is like kind of the same book. I haven't actually read this one yet, but from my knowledge, this is more of a pandemic story than natural disaster story, but the pandemic is directly related to the climate crisis. We've got multiple timelines here. Again, if you've read Station 11, I feel like you've also read this. It's a little strange, but it's multiple timelines that all interconnect in ways that we don't understand at the start but become prevalent later on. And it is set partially in 1912 Canada and partially on the moon 500 years later. A similar but not the same book probably is Walk the Vanished Earth by Aaron Swan. This is also multiple timelines, and I actually do get this and Sea of Tranquility confused because the plot of this, it's 4 different stories set in the same physical location but hundreds of years apart. So we've got 1873, 1975, and 2073. Sorry, 3 different storylines. And it's similar again where The future storyline is set on the moon, where Earth has suffered some sort of pandemic water crisis and it's a distant memory, but it is also tackling climate change. I mentioned earlier on a book that I was going to talk about that is more hopeful than depressing, and it's A Half-Built Garden by Ruthanna Emrys. This is a book about aliens. This is a book about Earth, us just doing our thing, and then aliens showing up out of nowhere to tell us we need to stop and we need to save our planet. And I really hope that they come soon and tell us that. It's set in 2083, which is not too long from now. It's sort of a power struggle between members of Earth and us thinking we can save ourselves versus these aliens saying, hey, if you're not going to come with us, we're going to make you come with us because your planet's dying. There are corporations, nation states, rogue factions all trying to represent humanity to the aliens, and I just think this is a really great book. This one is the kindest to Earth, I would say. The most faith in humanity that we see throughout these books. And I think it is a good example of the newer books that are coming out in the sci-fi genre being more on our side and less dystopian, depressing, more, hey, we're gonna be okay maybe if we do the right things. The last book that I have here in my pile is one that you've definitely heard of if you are a fantasy reader. It's the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. Now, if you're like, huh? I've totally read that. What? Yeah, you've read climate fiction. It's totally fantasy, but it is a solid entry in the sci-fi genre. I think this one is great because it is an example of how even in our high fantasy, we can find the themes of sci-fi. And that's good because it means even if you hate science fiction and speculative fiction and you're like, I only read fantasy, I don't care about any of this stuff, you can still learn about climate change from big fantasy books like 5th season. I'm actually literally wrapping up the video early because I'm getting too hot. Climate change is making this video end early. I'm sweating. My hair is sweaty. Oh my god. Seriously though, guys, sci-fi is a really fun genre in the way that all books have a sense of fun to them, like you're doing a fun activity, you're reading. But climate fiction is one of the most important subgenres right now, in my opinion. This video is for Earth Day, but as I say with a lot of my calendar-themed videos where I'm like, oh, Indie April, we're focusing on indie books. Earth Day, we're focusing on Earth Day. These are things we need to read all year round, not just once a year because it happens to line up with a day that's written on the calendar. Does this make any sense, or is my brain being baked by the sun? Climate change is real and important, and I know a lot of you are going to say like, well, it's the corporations, it's the government that needs to change in order to start fixing climate change, and yeah, I completely agree, but still do your part where you can. I know it's not easy for everyone. I know that cheap groceries and cheap home goods do have more plastic in them generally, and then people who can't afford the like environmentally friendly ones are getting blamed for their part in climate change, and that sucks. I think the point I'm trying to make now is the point I make a lot in these videos, which is just be nice to each other, do your part for the earth and for humanity. Read these books. I would love to hear all of your thoughts on today's video. Let me know if you're gonna read any of these books. If you think they're too depressing, don't do it. If you're excited though, if you're learning something new, let me know. Before I go, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring the bell icon so you know when I upload new videos. I upload 2 days a week. I love you guys. Goodbye.